This episode is proudly supported by Crunch. Running a hospitality business isn't for the faint-hearted. Between ordering stock, scheduling rosters, paying bills, motivating your team, and keeping customers happy, there's a lot on your plate. It's no surprise that business planning often gets put on the back burner. Well, here's something that can help. Introducing Crunch, a new app to help simplify the business side of hospo. With Crunch, you get access to practical, bite-sized education, proven strategies, and a supportive community of hospo owners just like you. When it comes to the Crunch, if you're looking for proven ways to build a successful, sustainable business, Crunch has you covered. Try Crunch now. To get 14 days free, just head to crunchhospo.com.au.
I just wanted to make sure that if there was an opportunity to connect with people in any shape or form that might have made people feel like they could talk to someone, have some support, or know that there was people they could connect with to reflect on what they're going through. Cooking for me and meal sharing was one of those outlets to connect with someone because you just never know what people might share or say or how they might feel over a meal.
Hello, everybody. It is Dani Valent here with you for an episode of Dirty Linen, our food and hospitality podcast. We talk to people in all different aspects of the food and restaurant world, sharing stories, giving people a platform who perhaps haven't had one before. Today's guest is, a little bit different from our normal run of the restaurant mill, but I'm really looking forward to our community. I'm really into our community and I'm really looking forward to our chat, which actually is a lot about community. So perhaps my little slip up there was not too out of place. As we head towards another Australian summer, it makes me think about going to the pub. It makes me think about sitting in the beer garden and relaxing with friends, maybe some visitors to Australia or to the regions. It was less than a year ago when people were doing just that in Daylesford, an hour and a half outside Melbourne, and something incredibly tragic happened. A car ploughed into the beer garden and killed 5 people. Absolutely devastating. We've also just heard recently that the driver of that car has been acquitted of all charges and will not stand trial. They're a diabetic, and the judge decided that the evidence was too weak to proceed and discharge the jury. Our guest today is Raman Richards. Raman is a resident of Daylesford. He is also a person who brings people together around food. Part of that is working with Beyond Blue and their Big Blue Table campaign to foster mental health conversations. I'm sure it is a very big time in Daylesford, Raman, and I'm really grateful to you for taking time out of everything you've got going on to talk to us here at Dirty Linen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dani, and appreciate you having me on the actual podcast and for the actual event and topic at hand.
Absolutely. How are things feeling in Daylesford? It's been a big time, and I'm sure people are still digesting news of the court case.
I think there's a couple of parts about it. I think, being a resident there now for a year, and I used to actually go to the Royal on Sundays to have a drink myself, but there's definitely some friends and people around the community that I've got to know since making the move over from Melbourne, and this is something that people are going to carry and carry for the rest of their lives. I've seen that firsthand, the impact that it's had. I've heard that through friends who I used to see more frequently that I don't see as often. But I think with the news that's just obviously been announced as of yesterday, and being part of, the Daylesford Grapevine, which is the Facebook page for the community with 11,000 people, there's hundreds and hundreds of comments, and those comments are really about just being a bit sort of dumbfounded about the decision that's been made. And there's a lot of hurt and pain in the community, not only from the news, but, that happened and transpired almost a year ago to the anniversary. And I think that's really going to carry a really heavy burden moving forward as well.
I know that you already had your Big Blue Table event planned before this latest court news occurred, but what sort of impact has it had on the town? You know, pubs are supposed to be such safe places of gathering, places to welcome people from outside the community as well as, you know, catching up with your neighbours. What was it like for this terrible accident to occur?
Well, I remember the day that it actually occurred, because it was just a Sunday where I wasn't sort of out there having, you know, a Sunday sit with friends as you do and as you've said. And my phone kind of just blew up. That blew up in terms of SMSs, phone calls. I was actually working at the time and I wasn't so sure what was going on myself because I just wasn't there, even though I live literally 2 minutes away from it. And you know, the impact and the news and the people around that community I hadn't seen anything like it before, Dani. Regardless where in Melbourne I've lived, I'd never quite sort of seen anything quite like it. And especially when you think it's a rural regional town, so it's a smaller community and therefore things that happen seem to have a bigger compounded impact. But there was a lot of despair, there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of, I suppose, obviously people were really upset about people's lives have been impacted here, right, in the end of the day. In fact, people's lives have been taken away and it doesn't really get more severe than that. So, you know, at the time and in the last 12 months, which has gone quite fast, you know, there's still a bit of a sense of a feeling. But again, I think the impact that's had is almost a year later to get the news that was recently delivered is only really going to compound people's emotions, I would imagine. I wouldn't kind of speak on behalf of, obviously, the victims. I think they've made that really vocal themselves and rightfully so. But it's just the community and everyone that really, you know, got to respond to the incident. So looking at the media, looking at the local community grapevine and what's happening and speaking to friends, it's almost like a bit of a double-edged sword where they've been cut once really deep and it seems like they've been cut again really, really deeply again.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because nothing, you know, no court result is going to bring those people back or erase what happened. But I suppose as humans, we always look for some sort of closure or a sense of justice. And if people feel that hasn't been possible, at least to date, then that it is a really tricky thing to negotiate as humans. Raman, you know, this is a conversation about a town, a community. It's a conversation about food and it's also a conversation about mental health. I would love you to frame it by talking about your background in food, the place that food has held for you as you've grown into an adult.
So food always really begun in the household, like many stories of food do. Having an Indian heritage and background, you know, my mum was, you know, we were lucky enough as three kids, you know, being brought up in Melbourne to have a mum who happened to be a restaurateur and have her own Indian restaurant. Over a span of about 40 years, about 5 restaurants around Victoria in particular. But food really started in the kitchen. I was always a taste tester for my mum, the youngest of 3 kids. I was always spoilt with, you know, lamb curry, paranta roti breads, vindaloo, red dals, you know, aloo gobi, all the really nice, beautiful things, you know, yogurt raitas. So I think for me, food has always just been ingrained in my DNA and as childhood. They're my earliest memories. And the one thing that Mum always taught me is that food connects people. And so subsequently, that passion of hers passed on to me. I didn't realise it until I got a little bit older and cooked a lot more and subsequently started hosting a lot of dinners and doing some community cooks for some community not-for-profits. And from there, it's just really been a case of, you know, continuing Mum's passion, really. And that's where it started. And I've been trying to take that forward, you know, now moving to Daylesford, and it seems to be getting a little bit broader and broader and wider, but you can never get, I don't think you can ever get too much Indian food, to be honest.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm always up for some Indian food and I continue to learn so much about regional Indian food. But Raman, you know, you grew up you know, in a house where Indian food was cooked, but it wasn't necessarily what your neighbours were making. Tell us about some of your encounters with non-Indian food.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, some people might be listening to this going, you know, butter chicken, vindaloo, paranta breads, how could you ever get over that? But, you know, you get to a point where, you know, you have too much of something and you just want a bit of variety, right? And at least that's how I felt, you know, thinking back, you know, as a 9-year-old in Montana South. And we had beautiful neighbours, you Kim, Michelle, and also their Trish and Andy, their parents, and beautiful Australian family, and they used to make steak and 3 veg, and I still remember when I was invited over for steak and 3 veg, and I'd never had it before, and asked my mum, and mum said that's fine, you can go there. And I just remember cauliflower, broccoli, and carrot, and this beautiful steak, and it was the best thing since sliced bread. And I remember it, and it was so different and so out of the norm of what I was used to being fed as a child in Montana in an Indian household, to the point where I asked Mum, can I go there again the day after? And Mum was like, no, Raman, you can't go there again. You need to, be here, respect your space and this and that. But it was honestly probably the best thing I've ever had. And funnily enough, if I think forward now, if someone asked me, Raman, what's your favourite meal? It would probably be steak and 3 veg, but just with some peppercorn sauce as well.
Do you reckon it was a good steak, or it was just because it was different?
You've got me now. But look, I will say that at the time, and there is a part of me that thinks, look, it was the best thing since sliced bread. If I look back at it, and I mean this respectfully, Trish and Andy, rest in peace, and also thank you very much for the meal, but if I look back at it now, it was probably the most overcooked steak I've ever had. The vegetables were oversteamed and were, pretty, well, let's just say they didn't look nutritious, or whatever nutritionist value they may have had, they didn't have any more. But I will admit it was the meal and introduction that got me into steak and 3 veg. And if I hadn't have had that encounter and experience as a child, I don't think I would have appreciated it as much as I do now. So it's relative. There's a connection there.
Definitely. So, Raman, tell us how food and mental health have intertwined for you.
So, I think Mum's always, being raised in an Indian family, food was always, number one, food connects people. I don't think that's exclusive to any culture or heritage. I think that's just as a blanket statement, food connects people, and especially around a table. Mum was always really, at least in our Indian household, Mum was always hosting dinners. She was always the only one that cooked, and we always had a really big cohort of people, whether it was friends and family, even school friends as well. At times my sisters and I had, 10, 15 people around, and I think, thinking back at it, half of these people probably didn't like us. They were just there for Mum's food. Not so much our friendship at the time, but I think actually, moving that forward, it was always something that I'd kind of carried forward. And when I'd made the move from Melbourne to Daylesford, I didn't really know anyone there. And I thought, what's a potential way to connect with the community? And that was through, Mum's recipes and just reaching out for people, asking who's interested in Indian food. Can you recommend me places to go and buy ingredients and that to cook, what Mum had taught me. And that sort of just turned into me connecting with a lot of the community and the community connecting back with me.
When we talk about mental health, have you got a particular, like a personal interest in battling depression?
So mental health for me started at the age of 18 when my parents we found out my parents were going to get divorced. And that was basically due to my dad having an affair. It was a case and a time in my life where I'd come out of high school, was looking to become a lawyer at Deakin University, and first year of university was all grand, and copped some news which was very left of field, and that subsequently stopped me pursuing my degree and what I thought I wanted to embark on in life. And it took me the good part of about 12 years till I was about 30 to really equip myself with the tools and enable myself to sort of work through depression as one form of mental health. And because of that time and experience, looking back now 10 years ago, I didn't really know too much about it. But the one thing I did know that is a lot of the time when people might look like they're doing okay and they feel fine and they might seem like an extrovert, a lot of the time that can be a front because there are underlying things that they just don't know how to equip or how to speak to people about. And so for me, I just wanted to, I think really to my core, I just wanted to make sure that if there was an opportunity to connect with people in any shape or form that might have made people feel like they could talk to someone, have some support, or know that there was people they could connect with to reflect on what they're going through. Cooking for me and meal sharing was one of those outlets to connect with someone because you just never know what people might share or say or how they might feel over a meal.
It's so powerful to think, that you went through these really tough times and came through them, but are now looking to connect with other people who may be, undergoing their own battles. I mean, what do you think it is about food that has helped you along this particular pathway?
I think, look, I often ask people, outside of what you do, for a career or to, make some bread and earn some bread, what are, 2 or 3 things you do as an outlet, outside of, what you do as a career? You get told things like, I might do Pilates, I might do yoga, I might journal. And these are really important, valuable things. For me, cooking has always been one of those outlets, because I think when you're in a kitchen, when you're using produce and when you're cooking, you don't think so much in your mind, or at least I didn't in my experience when I was going through depression and trying to battle and overcome it. It just became a time and a moment where there was just complete clarity, and I was just focused on what it was I was working on and what I wanted the end result to be. So I think when you have a meal with someone or you offer someone a meal, you can do it in a sense where a meal isn't where a conversation is required. In fact, they always say, the best meals, when I'm sure you've hosted a dinner or two in your time, Dani, but the best meals are when there is no conversation. You just hear those it's more of sighs of, this food is amazing, but no words need to be said. So I think that's where sometimes a connection can actually occur, is that people can eat a meal, feel great inside, get a flavour, but they don't need to actually verbalise how they're feeling or what they're going through. And that might be enough just to make someone feel a little bit happier in whatever they're going through in their own mind.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you're in that warm, trusting space, and perhaps, even if you didn't engage in a conversation at that time, that perhaps you feel like you've created a connection that you could lean on in the future if you did feel like you needed to, or that it was the right time to talk. Definitely something in that, I suppose, that generosity of feeding people and gathering as equals around a table. It is such a powerful thing that we do as humans. So Raman, tell me about some of the initiatives that you've been engaged in Daylesford.
So I think some of the initiatives really started from recipe sharing, trying to connect with the locals around, local farmers in particular and small businesses, especially, my mum being one for such a long period of time. I really take my hat off to all small businesses that pursue any, wanting to be a small business to begin with. It's pretty tough. But I think some of the big things for me were, in the period of the last 12 months, were just working for, or at least being asked to volunteer time to some not-for-profits such as Club 5000, which is an initiative in Daylesford which occurs every Friday at Victoria Pavilion, where, it's a group of amazing women who dedicate their time to cook and feed up to 40 to 50 people every Friday. And that's a community meal share that they embark on, and it consists of quite a lot of food. In fact, it's probably one of the best spreads I've ever seen in any shape and form. So just being asked to actually cook on a monthly basis, where I was asked to just cook in, my heritage and what mum taught me, Indian food, which is great. So, that was one of the initiatives. Similar in my first experience was also with an unbelievable organisation called the Good Grub Club in Daylesford, where they do a cook on a Tuesday, Thursday. They also deliver meals to people who might be in need. And so some of these initiatives happened very quickly in the first 6 months. And then I think the last initiative really, which was quite big, was a fundraiser we did for the Hepburn Wildlife Shelter, where we raised, $5,000 for an organisation that really needs support and financial aid. And that was for 100 people, at the Hepburn Golf Course. So, there's been quite a few initiatives that have occurred in a pretty short period of time. But it's just great to see that, the community have welcomed that. And then that, I suppose, that inertia and momentum still seems to be, compounding at the same time, which is really the objective as well.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about the Good Grub Club and people who are, glad to have a meal delivered to them. I think, some people perhaps would be surprised to think of Daylesford as a place where there was food insecurity. We think of it as associated with, beautiful produce and some fancy restaurants. What are some of the things we don't know about, regional towns?
Look, I think, being born and bred in Melbourne, it's, we sort of have somewhat, I think, you're in a bit of a bubble until you go out and you spend an extended period of time in a place you never lived in and don't know anything about. But I think one of the big parts is, especially being rural, is that, the need for tourism, the need for foot flow and traffic to be coming through to these rural towns is so important, because as a small business owner, and I know when Mum had her last restaurant in Bright, Alpine Valley, high country Victoria, that was a really big dependency. The businesses, wouldn't survive without it, because obviously, locals in the area can only support so much at different times, and everyone's going through a different situation in their own lives. So I think what I've seen, especially, in Daylesford, is that, there have been, significant amount of small businesses shut down, especially in hospitality, which is quite sad, and really great people and really great businesses. And, it's hard to see, in a short period, again, a lot of these businesses shut down. So I think the need, and at least having the awareness, like mental health, is so important, and it couldn't be any more important than now, to really support one another, or at least try and do an initiative that keeps the lights on for businesses.
And so tell us, Raman, about the Big Blue Table.
So the Big Blue Table, Australia-wide initiative, which occurs in October. The first Big Blue Table I had actually volunteered to run one was going back 2 years ago when I was in Melbourne. It was done at the house in Ashburton. We had about 30, 40 people. Mum and I played chef, which was great, and it was a big Indian spread. But the Big Blue Table that I volunteer to host here in Hepburn Springs. That occurs on Sunday, the 20th of October. It's been held at an unbelievable art gallery called Radius Art in Hepburn. And there's going to be about 60 to 70 people attending. The day consists of awareness first and foremost around mental health. So it's really about connection, again, through food. It's really about reflection. And it's also really about taking the position that what can often be quite uncomfortable to speak about, being mental health, shouldn't have to be made to feel uncomfortable. So the objective is really connect people, reflect, do it through a lot of Indian food. Mum's coming down from Melbourne, which is great, so we're cooking up an absolute feast. Would love to see you there as well, Dani, if you can make it, of course, naturally. But also raise awareness and fundraising. Our objective is $3,000 for the goal for this particular Big Blue Table, and we're already halfway through. So it's a really, really great initiative Australia-wide, and just really, really fortunate and lucky to be part of it.
I hope it's a really special night and does give people that space, or if not to have conversations on the night, but to create those links where they feel they can have those conversations when they're able to. I mean, how important do you think this dinner is?
Look, I think mental health is crucial, and talking about it and having and feeling like you have a support base or people you can turn to when things get tough, especially in your own mind, is always priority number one, and something that's always, I think it's one of those things where you just can't place an importance on that number one. I think the lunch itself is extremely important, because it allows not only myself, because it's really about, there's a level of vulnerability. And so, there's a few people I'll be speaking to or already have that are getting out of their comfort zone, because it's not easy to talk about. A lot of the time people internalize it, and that's completely okay as well. But to know you've got a support base or people you can turn to and talk to, or at least, exchange a conversation where someone might be going through something and you might be going through something that's a little bit, similar, but not. Just having that there is also kind of that safe environment to do so. So it's extremely important. I think also in the community itself, whilst the Big Blue Table was always first and foremost, the timing of the events that occurred almost a year ago just seemed to be a little bit coincidental and sort of link off in the area. And a lot of the people that are coming were there at the time of the incident as well, which is obviously appalling and should never have happened to begin with. But I think if anything, it's just about bringing people together and letting them know that there is support, and that's a key thing. So I think the timing of it all is also quite important.
And Raman, no doubt there will be people listening to this podcast who are, struggling with their own mental health. Without wanting to put you in the spotlight as an expert, just from your experience, what kinds of steps do you think they might consider?
So I think one of the biggest parts, or at least if I reflect back when I was going through depression, which was, what's the first step I take? How to somewhat equip and enable myself. And before I started volunteering for Beyond Blue on their Blue Voices and their online forums, It was actually just to register anonymously and just, seek information or perhaps someone to talk to online. That was a really big step because that just showed me that there were avenues which I didn't even need to leave my house. I didn't need to give my name. I could be completely anonymous. So that was a really big step for me, was just going to the Blue Voices forums and seeing that there were people that were willing to have a conversation and help, or I could actually just read topics that would allow me to get some insight, to perhaps challenge my own thinking or to at least equip or reshape my thinking. So that's number one. Number two was just acknowledging also that you don't need to do anything too dramatic or anything too wild and out there. Something as simple as perhaps just getting out for a walk, or perhaps just actually writing in a journal, or even just actually cooking something that you may not have cooked of, a meal, something you've never done before, as a form of getting out of your comfort zone and having an outlet where you're not preoccupied in your mind all day. They were some really, I suppose for me, some steps that I took which made a really, really big difference, through my journey of mental health.
And Raman, what's your mum's name?
Pooja is her name.
Okay, well, Pooja, I'm so excited for everybody who gets to taste her food. Do you know what's on Pooja's menu for the Big Blue Table fundraiser?
So you might need a napkin or something because you might be salivating a little bit more as well. But there'll be a bit of lamb curry. There'll be some butter chicken. There's definitely going to be some beef vindaloo, some red lentil dal. There'll be a vegetarian coconut dish. There'll definitely be some pakoras, some jeera rice. We'll have some rajma, some makhani dal, mum's special chicken wings. Lots of vegan, vegetarian, but plenty of poultry and meat as well. And, don't get me wrong, lamb potato curry is my absolute favourite and always will be. Right, the salads. There'll be some good old green chutneys as well with enough heat just to get you kind of tongue tingling a bit. But loads of food will be there on the day. And knowing mum, she'll probably have things we haven't even discussed. But that's the beauty of mums. You just never know, right? It'll be this and then it will be 10 times more. I'm sure everyone will be very welcomed. And being Indian, you never have one plate full. My mum's rule is really simple. Unless you have 2 platefuls, you're not allowed to leave the 4 walls and the dinner table or lunch. So that's just a snippet of what is to come.
Wow. Well, I'm extremely intrigued about Mum's special chicken wings. So that might be enough to get me up the highway all by themselves. But sounds amazing, Raman. Congratulations on the important work that you're doing. I just think it's so positive and so necessary. I'm sure that the Daylesford community is super glad that you've moved in amongst them, and wishing you all the best with your own journey and with the Big Blue Table.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to me, and just even the exposure and the opportunity to speak with you and be on your podcast means a hell of a lot, especially for mental health and Beyond Blue as well.
We'll put a couple of links in the show notes, everybody, so check it out. And Raman, thanks for catching up. Talk to you soon.
Been a pleasure. Have a great weekend ahead, and thank you all again.
Thank you. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat.deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This